Okay, imagine this. Just one tiny mistake in a book.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just need a little correction note. It causes, well, absolute chaos, ruin even.
And leaves this incredible, like, infamous legacy, right?
Exactly. And that's not fiction. It's the real story behind one very notorious book.
The Wicked Bible of 1631. That's what we're digging into today, isn't it?
It is this King James Bible, fresh off the press,
Uh-huh.
but with an error so huge, so, fundamentally wrong.
It basically sent shockwaves through society back then. 17th century England, I mean.
And this whole deep dive is possible because of the sources you gave us.
Right, the articles, the notes laying out the whole story.
The history, the people, the frankly staggering consequences of this one printing slip-up.
So our mission today, unpack what went down.
Yeah, explore the theories. Was it just a slip or something more deliberate?
Sabotage, maybe. And why did it matter so much then?
And why are we still talking about this Bible, this artifact, hundreds of years later?
Okay, let's get into it.
Right. The mistake itself. 1631, London, printers Robert Barker and Martin Lucas.
Yep. And the big one, the error everyone knows, is in Exodus 20.14.
The 10 Commandments.
Exactly. So instead of thou shalt not commit adultery,
Uh-oh.
the crucial word not just wasn't there.
Gone. Leaving it as thou shalt commit adultery.
Yeah. Just think about that for a second.
It completely reverses a core moral law. You can see why people were shocked. The sources make that very clear.
Absolutely. It wasn't just tweaking a word, it twisted a fundamental principle. Religion was everything then.
But interestingly, the sources you provided say that wasn't the only big mistake.
No, there was another pretty bad one in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 24.
This is the great ass one.
That's the one. Instead of saying God showed his glory and great greatness,
He came out as
his glory and his great ass.
great ass, as in, well, a donkey.
Right. And while maybe ass wasn't quite as vulgar then as now, it still made zero sense in the context.
Completely undercut the whole divine majesty thing.
Definitely. And the sources point out something important about these two errors.
What's that?
Well, the first one, the adultery commandment, is an omission. A whole word just dropped.
Okay.
The second one, greatness to ass, that's a substitution. A few letters changed.
And that matters because...
Because apparently single-letter typos were, well, pretty common in printing back then, but dropping a whole word like not, that seemed odder, less likely to be simple slip.
Yeah, that makes sense. It feels more significant somehow. Either deliberate or just a massive, massive oversight.
Exactly, which feeds into the whole debate later. But to get why any printing error could cause such an uproar, we need a picture printing then.
Right. 17th century London. Printing wasn't brand new, been around since the 1470s.
Yeah, getting more efficient. But buying and distributing books, still developing.
And Bible specifically, owning one wasn't like today. Early on, they were incredibly expensive.
Like crazy expensive. Sources say equivalent to maybe $10,000, even $20,000 today.
Wow. So mostly just churches and the super wealthy had them?
But the printing press changed that massively. Cut costs by, what, 80%?
Yeah, the sources say about 80%. So now a skilled worker maybe could afford one.
But it was still a big investment. you know,
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3 weeks' wages.
So if you bought one, you expected it to be right. Perfect, even.
Exactly. And the whole industry was tightly controlled by the crown through patents.
And the absolute top job, the patent everyone wanted, was Queen's Printer, or later, King's Printer.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't just a title, it was a monopoly.
The sole right to print Bibles, prayer books, official stuff.
Which meant guaranteed business. Hugely profitable.
And Robert Barker's dad, Christopher, he held that title from 1583.
And when he died, Robert inherited it all. The business, the title, the monopoly.
Now, Robert Barker wasn't totally inexperienced. He was involved in printing the 1611 King James Bible.
True, but the sources are pretty blunt. Even that famous 1611 version had mistakes initially, needed corrections later.
So maybe a bit of a history of not quite perfect printing?
Perhaps. Not Wicked Bible level, but still. For this 1631 job, he partners with Martin Lucas.
And Lucas, the sources say he was handling the estate of another printer, John Bill.
Right, suggesting he probably knew the business too.
Okay, so we have experienced printers, a high-stakes book, which leads to the big question.
Was this disaster just a terrible accident?
Yeah.
Or was it something else?
Malice, sabotage.
Well, you have to consider the sheer scale. The King James Bible has, what, over 780,000 words?
Yeah, a massive text. And they were printing lots of Bibles back then. Sources mention maybe 144 editions between 1560 and 1644.
Setting all that type by hand. Mistakes were bound to happen sometimes. Human error is real.
And the sources give other examples, right? Other Bibles with weird typos.
Yeah, like the murderer's Bible.
Which said?
Let the children be killed instead of filled.
Yikes. Or the Sinan Bible.
That one read sin on more instead of sin no more. Again, bad, but usually small slips.
So that missing not in the commandment and maybe even the ass, they just felt different, bigger.
Exactly, which is where the sabotage theory comes in. And this part is, well, pretty juicy.
It revolves around Barker's rival. Right. Bonham Morton.
Bonham Norton, another rich, ambitious printer. And he desperately wanted that King's Printer title for himself.
And their history was complicated.
Oh, very. Sources say they were rivals, then friends, even printed that 1611 Bible together.
Their kids got married, apparently, in 1615.
Yeah. But then, just a few years later, 1618, they're suing each other, rotten over company shares.
Messy. And it clouded who actually held the King's Printer title.
Totally. And one source flat out describes Norton during this time as vexatious and jealous.
Vexatious. That's a great word.
Isn't it? So, given all that bad blood, Norton wanting the monopoly.
The question becomes, did he deliberately wreck Barker's 1631 printing?
It's a compelling thought. What better way to ruin Barker's reputation? Maybe get his patent revoked and swoop in.
There's even a specific theory mentioned, isn't there?
Yeah, that Norton might have found someone working in Barker's print shop. Someone maybe heavily in debt, easily persuaded, and paid them to insert those errors.
Wow, calculated.
It's a strong narrative. But, and this is important, the sources stress, that nobody ever definitively proved how it happened.
So it could have been sabotage, or it could have been just a colossal screw-up.
Both remain on the table, historically speaking. Plausible interpretations.
Either way, the fallout was immediate and brutal once it was discovered.
Which took about a year, apparently.
And the reaction from the top, King Charles I, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
George Abbott. They were, not pleased.
Sources say incandescent with rage.
That's the phrase. Abbott, especially, seemed to see it as proof of declining standards.
Yeah, he apparently complained about printers using inexperienced compositors' boys and unlearned proofreaders.
Compared to the good old days with grave and learned men and better paper, apparently.
So Barker and Lucas get summoned before the Star Chamber.
Which sounds ominous. And apparently it was. A court with huge power, not much due process.
And they tried to blame their staff?
Oh, yeah. Pointed fingers everywhere, typesetters, proofreaders. One source even mentions blaming the dusting lady.
Desperate. Did it work?
Not a chance. The punishment was severe. First, a massive fine, 300 pounds.
And you mentioned earlier that's like 50,000 pounds or 53,000 pounds today.
Roughly, yeah. A huge sum, designed to break them financially.
But it wasn't just the money, was it?
No. They were stripped of their printing license, kicked out of the trade, livelihood gone.
And the Bibles themselves. All 1,000 copies.
Ordered to be found and burned. Every last one.
What a disaster. And for Robert Barker, the sources say it really was the end.
Truly tragic. The scandal, the fine, it ruined him. He spent the rest of his life in and out of debtor's prison.
Died in prison, didn't he? King's Bench Prison in 1643.
Yeah. A very sad end for someone who held such a prestigious position.
And Martin Lucas, his partner, what happened to him?
The sources are a bit hazy on Lucas's fate, actually. He was involved as executor for John Bill's estate, so maybe less personally invested. It's not clear.
So the king ordered all copies destroyed, but some survived.
They did, despite the order. As one source nicely put it, the mistake was just too good for people to not want to be able to enjoy it.
A bit of rebellious collecting, maybe? How many are left?
The numbers vary a bit in the sources. Some say 9 or 10. Others, maybe up to 15 known copies still exist.
And it wasn't called the Wicked Bible right away?
No, that name came much later, 1855, an American book dealer, Henry Stevens.
What'd he do?
He was showing one off, thought the official title, 1631 Octavo Bible, was boring.
So he came up with Wicked Bible?
Yep, catchy, scandalous, it stuck. It also got called the Adulterer's Bible, or Sinner's Bible.
Makes sense. And today, these survivors are collector's items.
Hugely sought after. Real treasures for bibliophiles because of the story.
And valuable, I assume.
Extremely. Sources mention one auctioned in 2015. Estimated 10K, 15K.
And it sold for?
31,250 pounds. Way over the estimate. The notoriety adds massive value.
It's just amazing how one word or the lack of it created this whole legacy.
It really is. And there's an interesting perspective in one of the sources about that.
Oh, yeah.
It sort of suggests that, even with human errors like this, the message or the divine can still come through. That God is bigger than mistakes.
Kind of a theological take on it.
Yeah, emphasizing that maybe faith isn't just about a perfectly printed text, which humans can mess up. It's more about belief, interpretation, the Holy Spirit helping discern truth.
Needing active faith, reading scripture yourself, praying to really understand, rather than just relying on a potentially flawed printing.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the physical book is produced by fallible humans.
So reflecting on all this, what does this story tell us, this whole dive into the wicked Bible?
Well, for one, the incredible power of just a single word, how omitting not flipped everything.
Definitely. And it's such a human story, isn't it? Rivalry, ambition.
Oh, yeah. Potential sabotage, simple error, the mechanisms of production.
And then the consequences. Severe, life-altering consequences.
And it taps into our fascination with mistakes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially famous ones.
And maybe things that are forbidden. The fact they were ordered destroyed makes the survivors even more compelling.
Totally. There's an allure there.
So we went from one missing word in a London shop
to a ruined career, a prison death.
and now a super valuable historical artifact people pay tens of thousands for.
It's quite the journey.
Eh,
And again, we could only trace it because of the sources you shared.
Yeah, thanks again for those. They really opened up this whole story.
Definitely.
So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. What does it actually tell us about history and maybe about ourselves that a book the king ordered burned is now so treasured? What does that say about how we view authority or maybe transgression or just a really good scandalous story?
And that's a wrap on this episode of What You Don't Know, You Don't Know. If your brain feels a little fuller or like it just stumbled onto something way more interesting than expected, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss next week's deep dive into, well, something you didn't even know you didn't know.